This is the story of a train ride I will never forget. A story that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. I'm going to tell you everything that happened. Just listen carefully, because once you hear it, you might not look at train rides the same way again. It all started on a cold winter evening. I had missed my bus and had no choice but to take the last train heading out of the city. The station was almost empty, except for a few people scattered around. The digital board above the platform flickered like it had trouble staying alive, showing 11:45 p.m., final train to Hollow Creek. I had never even heard of Hollow Creek, but it was going in the direction I needed, and I thought I could catch a cab from a nearby town once I got off. The ticket machine didn't work properly. I had to hit it a few times just to get it to print a ticket. That should have been my first sign. But I was tired. I just wanted to get home. When the train finally pulled in, it was slower than normal, and it made this low screeching noise as it came to a stop. The doors opened with a hiss like the train was sighing. I stepped inside and right away I felt something strange. It was warm, but not in a comfortable way. The kind of warmth that feels wrong, like the air inside had been trapped too long. It smelled faintly of rust and something sweet but rotten. There were a few passengers inside, but none of them looked up when I walked in. They were completely silent, staring ahead or at their laps. No one was talking, no phones, no noise. I found a seat in the middle of the car and sat down quietly. The lights above flickered for a moment, then settled into a soft, dim glow. Once, soon as the doors closed and the train started moving, I felt this tightness in my chest, like something wasn't right. The train was unusually quiet. No clack-clack of wheels on tracks, no announcements, no conductor walking down the aisle, just this weird humming silence. After a while, I tried to distract myself by looking at my phone, but I had no signal, not even one bar. That was strange, because we hadn't even gone underground. I tried to tell myself maybe we were just out of the city's range. But then I noticed something else. The windows. There was nothing outside them. No lights, no trees, no towns. Just pitch black like the train was floating through space. I pressed my face against the glass, but it was like staring into a void. That's when I realized the train wasn't slowing down. It was going faster. Too fast. I looked around at the other passengers again. They hadn't moved at all. Still, in the same positions like statues. I started feeling uneasy, like I was the only living person on board. I stood up and slowly walked down the aisle, pretending to stretch my legs, but really just trying to see if anyone else would react. Nobody did. I passed a woman with long black hair covering her face. She was holding something tightly in her lap, wrapped in cloth. A man in a suit was sitting with his eyes open but completely still. I waved a hand in front of his face. Nothing, not even a blink. It was like he wasn't really there. I was about to head to the next car when I heard something behind me, a quiet whisper. I turned around quickly, but no one was looking at me, still silent. I stood there, heart pounding, wondering if I had imagined it. Then I heard it again, this time clearer. A whisper that said, "Don't leave this car." My blood turned cold. I spun around. "Who said that?" I asked, my voice shaky. Nobody answered. The whisper came again. "Don't leave this car. The others aren't safe." This time I realized it wasn't coming from a person. It was like the voice was in my head, but not my own thought. A whisper from somewhere else warning me. I backed away from the door to the next car and sat down again. My hands were trembling. I stared at the passengers again, and for a second, I thought I saw the woman with the black hair smile. Just a little. That was when the lights flickered again. But this time, they went out completely. I was surrounded by darkness. I couldn't see anything. I could hear the hum of the train speeding up, but nothing else. I held my breath. Then, out of the darkness, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, dragging footsteps. Coming closer. From the other end of the car, I froze. The footsteps got louder, closer. I didn't know whether to run or hide or just stay still. I couldn't even see where they were coming from. Then the lights flickered back on for just a split second, and I saw it. Something tall, taller than any person, thin, with arms that reached the floor. Its head was bent, almost touching its chest, and its skin looked gray and stretched. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were just empty holes. It was right there, 2 seats away. Then darkness again. I screamed. The lights flickered on again, and it was gone. Gone. But now the passengers were all looking at me, every single one of them. Faces that were blank just moments ago now stared straight at me with dead, cold eyes. No one blinked. No one moved. They just stared. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then the voice whispered again. "Stay seated. Don't look away." I was shaking, but I listened. I stared back at them, refusing to look away. Minutes passed, maybe more, and slowly, one by one, they all turned their heads back to where they were before. The lights stayed on, but now everything felt wrong. I kept glancing at the door, wondering what would happen if I opened it, but I remembered the voice. Eventually, the train began to slow down. Through the window, I finally saw something. A small, broken-down station. The sign read, "Black Hollow," not Hollow Creek like the board had said. The doors hissed open. Nobody moved. I stood up slowly, ready to get out, when the voice whispered one last time, "If you get off here, you can never come back." I looked at the silent passengers, looked at the empty darkness outside. Then I stepped off. The air outside was freezing, colder than I had ever felt. The station was falling apart, with vines growing over the walls and old signs rusted beyond reading. There was no one there. No lights. No sound. I turned around to look at the train, but it was gone. No noise. No tracks. Just empty space where it had been. I walked to the edge of the platform and looked around. Nothing. Not a road, not a building, just endless forest and fog. I never found my way back. That night was years ago, and sometimes I still hear the sound of a train in the distance. But no tracks lead to this place, and I know now. That train never brought me home. It took me somewhere else, somewhere I was never meant to go. So if you ever find yourself at a quiet train station late at night, and a strange train shows up that you've never seen before, don't get on. Please, just don't. Let me tell you another story. A train ride horror story that happened to a friend of mine. This one still haunts me because it's so real, so close to home. Listen carefully, because this isn't just a spooky tale. It's something that could happen to anyone. It was a late November evening when Mark decided to catch the 10:15 p.m. train from London to a small town called Ashford. Mark was a regular guy, simple job, lived in a cramped apartment, just looking forward to a quiet weekend away from the city noise. That night, He was tired after a long week, but eager to get home. The station was nearly empty, except for a few scattered travelers waiting on the platform. Mark bought his ticket from the machine, then sat on a cold metal bench under a flickering streetlight. The wind was biting, and he pulled his coat tighter around him. The platform clock ticked closer to 10:15. When the train arrived, it was an old model, the kind with creaky doors and wooden seats inside. Mark stepped in, looking for an empty seat. The carriage wasn't crowded. Just a handful of people were scattered around. A middle-aged man reading a newspaper, a young woman staring out the window, and a pair of teenagers whispering quietly in a corner. Mark chose a seat near the window, the one next to the middle-aged man. As the train pulled away from the station, the usual clatter of wheels on rails was there, but something felt off. The carriage lights were dimmer than normal, flickering occasionally, casting strange shadows on the faces of the passengers. Mark shrugged it off, took out his phone, but the screen stayed blank. No signal. He tried again, but nothing. That's when he noticed the woman by the window wasn't moving at all. Not blinking, not breathing heavily, just sitting like a statue staring blankly outside. He looked away, feeling a little uncomfortable. The train passed through countryside, the landscape a blur of dark trees and empty fields. Then, without warning, the train jolted. It wasn't a normal bump. It felt like it had hit something heavy on the tracks. The lights flickered wildly and then went out completely. For a moment, there was only blackness and the low hum of the train moving forward. A wave of panic rushed through Mark. The other passengers whispered nervously, their voices soft but uneasy. Suddenly, the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the carriage in a faint red glow. Mark heard footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps coming. From the next carriage, the teenagers in the corner looked terrified. The man with the newspaper had dropped it. The woman by the window finally blinked, but her eyes looked different. Hollow, empty. Mark's heart pounded. He wanted to get up, to move somewhere else, but his body felt frozen. Then the train came, to a sudden stop. No announcements. No sound of the conductor. Just silence. The window showed nothing but thick fog, so dense Mark couldn't see a thing outside. Mark noticed a faint, almost glowing figure standing at the far end of the carriage. It wasn't quite human. Too tall, too thin, with eyes that glowed faintly in the red light. It moved closer, floating rather than walking, and the air around it felt cold. The passengers all turned to look at the figure, then back at Mark, their faces blank and expressionless. Mark scrambled for his phone again. No signal. The figure moved closer, and Mark could hear a whisper, soft but clear. "You shouldn't be here." Suddenly, the woman by the window let out a strange laugh. A sound not quite human, more like a hiss. The teenagers covered their ears and screamed, but the scream sounded distant, as if underwater. Mark knew he had to get off the train. He jumped up and ran toward the doors, but they wouldn't open. He pulled hard, panic rising, but the handles didn't budge. The glowing figure reached out a hand. Mark could see its long, sharp fingers now. He backed away, heart racing. The lights flickered once more, and then everything went dark. When the lights came back on, the carriage was empty. Mark was alone. The train started moving again, faster and faster. Mark sat down on the floor, shaking. After what felt like hours, the train finally slowed and pulled into a station. The doors hissed open, and Mark didn't hesitate. He ran off the train and into the foggy night. The station was deserted, not a single soul around. No lights, no cars, just the distant sound of the train pulling away. Mark looked back at the platform sign. It read, Raven's End. He had never heard of that station before, and he never found it on any map. When Mark finally made it back home the next morning, tired, shaken, he checked the news. No reports of any delayed or lost trains, no missing passengers, only one strange thing. There was a small article buried in the back pages about a train accident that happened 50 years ago. A train going to Ashford crashed near a place called Raven's End. Everyone on board disappeared without a trace. Mark never took that train again. Sometimes late at night he still hears the sound of a train whistle outside his window, and he wonders, what if the train is still running? What if the passengers are still trapped inside, forever riding between places that don't exist? So next time you catch a late train, pay attention to the people around you. Because sometimes the ride isn't just a ride, it's a journey you might never come back from. Here's another story for you. A train ride horror story. This one happened to a guy named James. It's one of those stories you don't believe until it happens to you. So, listen close, because I'm going to tell you everything that went wrong on that night. James worked in the city but lived about 2 hours away in a small town called Whitmore. Every day, he took the train to get to work, and every evening he took it back home. But one night, everything changed. It was late October, and the sky was gray and heavy with rain. James was coming home after a long day. The station was crowded, with people trying to get away from the weather. James squeezed onto the train just before the doors closed, finding a seat near the middle of the carriage. The train was old and rattled as it moved. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, and the windows were fogged up from the cold outside and the warmth inside. James settled in, took out his phone, but as usual, there was no signal. After about 15 minutes, the train stopped suddenly. No announcement, just a hard jolt that threw everyone forward. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the carriage into darkness. People whispered nervously. James fumbled for his phone to use the flashlight but realized the battery was dead. Then, he heard it, a soft, almost rhythmic tapping, like fingers knocking on a window. But when he looked, no one was outside. The rain was hitting the glass in uneven patterns, but this tapping didn't match. James turned to look at the other passengers. Most were silent, but one man near the back of the carriage was staring at the window with wide eyes. James tried to catch his attention, but the man didn't respond. The tapping continued, growing louder and faster, like someone was trying to get in. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and James saw a figure outside the window. A woman in a long white dress soaked by the rain, standing perfectly still on the tracks. Her hair was dark and hung over her face, hiding her eyes. The train hadn't started moving again yet. The other passengers noticed too, and began murmuring, some leaning to look out the windows. James stared at the woman, feeling a chill run down his spine. Then, as the train began to pull away, the woman raised her head slowly. Her face was pale and wet with rain, but her eyes were bright and glowing red. James looked away quickly, his heart racing. Suddenly the lights in the carriage flickered again, and the temperature dropped sharply. James could see his breath in, the cold air. The woman outside vanished as the train gained speed, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. James noticed that one by one, the passengers began to disappear. First, The man staring at the window was gone. No sign of where he had gone, no announcement, nothing. Then, the teenagers whispering in the corner disappeared. The woman near the door vanished too. James looked around in panic, but he was the only one left. The carriage door at the end slowly creaked open, and James heard footsteps coming closer. Heavy, slow footsteps that echoed in the empty carriage. He backed away, heart pounding. A voice whispered from the dark doorway. "Why are you still here?" James wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. Then the voice said again, "You should have gotten off." The lights flickered one last time and went out completely. In the darkness, James felt a cold hand grab his shoulder. He screamed, but no sound came out. Then, the lights returned, and James was alone on the train again. The train finally stopped at a station, but it wasn't Whitmore. The platform was old, cracked, and empty, except for a faded sign that read, "Blackwood Station." James stepped off the train, looking around for help, but the station was silent. No lights, no people. Just the sound of the wind and distant thunder. He walked toward the exit, but the doors were locked. Panicked, he tried to open them, but they wouldn't budge. Behind him, the train doors closed, and the lights inside went out. James was trapped. He spent what felt like hours wandering the empty platform until the train doors opened again. People boarded, but these were no ordinary passengers. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow, and their movements slow and unnatural. They didn't speak, just stared at James. The voice whispered in his ear again, "You belong here now." James ran back onto the train, heart hammering. The train pulled away faster and faster until the platform disappeared into fog. James never saw Whitmore again. To this day, no one knows what happened to him after that night. And sometimes, when the clock strikes midnight, people report seeing a ghostly train speeding through the countryside, with a lone figure staring out the window. They say that if you listen carefully, you can hear the tapping on the window, and if you look too closely, you might see the woman in white waiting for her next passenger. So if you ever find yourself on a late train and it stops at a station that doesn't look familiar, don't get off, because you might never come back. I've got another story for you. A train ride horror story that's been told around a few times, but believe me, it's chilling every time you hear it. It's about a guy named Daniel, and what happened to him on a night train ride he thought would be normal. Let me take you through it. Daniel was a university student living in Manchester. One cold December evening, after a late night studying, he decided to catch the last train back home to his parents' house in a small town called Grimsby. The train was supposed to be empty, a quiet ride to relax before the busy week ahead. He got to the station around 11:30 p.m. The platform was nearly deserted except for a few late travelers. Daniel bought his ticket from the machine and waited. The air was chilly, and the wind blew faintly through the station. When the train arrived, Daniel stepped inside the carriage. It was dimly lit, with old-fashioned wooden seats. There were only a handful of people scattered across the carriage. A man in a dark coat reading a newspaper, a woman in a red scarf staring out the window, and an elderly couple sitting quietly. Daniel took a seat near the middle of the carriage by a window and pulled his coat tighter around himself. The train slowly pulled out of the station with a soft screech. At first, everything seemed normal. The gentle rocking motion, the faint hum of the engine, the muffled sounds of the city fading away. But after about 20 minutes, something strange started to happen. The lights in the carriage began to flicker, first just once or twice, then more rapidly. Daniel noticed that the man with the newspaper suddenly stopped reading and stared blankly ahead, his eyes wide and unblinking. Chuck, woman in the red scarf, didn't move at all. Her face was pale and she didn't blink. The elderly couple whispered quietly, but their voices were strange, almost a hiss. Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. Suddenly, the train jerked hard and came to an abrupt stop. There was no sound of brakes before, just that sudden halt. The windows outside were pitch black, like the train had stopped somewhere in the middle of nowhere, at night with no lights at all. Then the intercom crackled to life. A voice came through. Low, distorted, almost robotic. "Passengers, we have a delay. Please remain calm." Daniel frowned. That voice didn't sound right. It gave him a bad feeling. He looked around at the other passengers. The man in the dark coat was gone. The woman in the red scarf was gone. The elderly couple, gone too. It was just Daniel alone in the carriage. He tried the doors, but they were locked. His phone had no signal, and the screen flickered before going black. Then, from the far end of the carriage, he heard footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps that echoed louder and louder. Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to move but felt stuck in his seat, like something was holding him down. The footsteps stopped just outside the door to his compartment. The door handle rattled. A cold breath brushed Daniel's neck. He spun around, but no one was there. The lights flickered violently, then went out completely. Daniel was left in total darkness. He heard whispering voices all around him, but he couldn't understand the words. The temperature dropped sharply, and his breath formed, small clouds in front of him. Suddenly, the train lurched forward, faster and faster. The whispering grew louder, almost screaming. Then the lights flashed back on. Daniel found himself staring at a face, pale, with dark, hollow eyes, a wide mouth stretched in a cruel grin. It was the man from the newspaper, but now, not quite human. The figure moved closer, its smile widening. Daniel screamed and tried to get up, but the seatbelt, which he hadn't noticed before, was tightly fastened around him. He struggled, heart racing. The creature whispered, "You should have stayed home." Daniel's vision blurred. The train raced through dark tunnels, each one filled with flickering lights and shadows reaching out. Suddenly, the train slowed and stopped at a station Daniel didn't recognize. He looked outside, a foggy platform, empty except for a single lamppost casting a weak, flickering light. He tried the door again, and this time it clicked open. Daniel stepped out onto the platform. The air was thick and cold. He looked around but saw no signs of life. The station sign read Black Hollow. Daniel had never heard of it. He felt a presence behind him and turned to see the passengers, or what was left of them, standing silently, their eyes hollow, faces pale. The man with the cruel grin stepped forward. "You belong here now," he said. Daniel tried to run, but the fog thickened and slowed him down. The figures surrounded him, whispering and laughing softly. Then everything went black. Daniel woke up in his bed at home. He looked at his phone. It was morning. Had it all been a nightmare? But then he saw the train ticket on his desk. It was stamped Black Hollow, and his phone was dead. Daniel never took the train again, but sometimes, late at night, he hears the distant sound of a train whistle outside his window, and sometimes when the lights flicker, he sees a pale face staring back at him from the dark. So, next time you take a late train ride, watch the people around you, because you might not be as alone as you think, and You might just find yourself stopping at a place that doesn't exist. A place where no one ever leaves. This is the story of a train ride I'm going to tell you. And it's not just any ride. It was supposed to be a simple, peaceful trip home. But what happened that night still keeps me up sometimes. I don't know if you'll believe me, but I need to tell someone. So, listen carefully. It happened to a girl named Emily Carter. She was 27, worked in a small bookstore in London. It was early November, and the air already smelled like winter. Emily had taken the day off to visit her sister in Brighton. They spent the day drinking tea, talking about everything and nothing. When the time came to leave, her sister offered to let her stay the night, but Emily said no. She wanted her own bed, her own quiet. She booked a late train, the 11:45 p.m., from Brighton to London. It wasn't a popular time, so the station was mostly empty. She liked it that way. No noise, no crowds. The train pulled in on time. Cold air rushed past her legs as the doors opened. The carriage she stepped into was nearly empty. Just a few scattered people. A man in a beanie with headphones in. An older woman knitting slowly. A couple whispering and laughing quietly to themselves. Emily took a window seat and wrapped her scarf a little tighter around her neck. The train started moving. Everything was normal. Streetlights and empty stations passed outside the fogged-up glass. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of the train calm her. But when she opened them, something had changed. The lights above flickered just for a second. Not unusual, she thought. Old trains did that. But then it happened again. And again. The flickering got faster, almost like the train was struggling to keep its grip on the power, and then it all went dark. Complete blackout. No lights. No sound. Emily froze. She could hear her own breathing and the distant hum of the engine slowly dying away. And then, silence. The train had stopped, not slowed down. Stopped completely. She looked out the window but saw nothing. Just blackness. No station. No signs. Just empty trees, maybe. It was hard to tell. She turned to look at the other passengers. They were gone. All of them. The man in the beanie, gone. The woman with the knitting. Her needles were lying on the seat, the yarn trailing onto the floor. The couple, nowhere to be seen. Emily stood up. Her heart began to pound in her chest. She walked through the carriage, calling out softly, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Nothing. Just the creak of the train. She tried her phone. No signal. She pressed the emergency button near the door. It buzzed once and then died. She was completely alone. Or so she thought. As she stood there, trying to figure out what to do next, she heard it. A faint sound, like footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Coming from the next carriage. Emily backed up. "Hello?" she called out, her voice shaky. No answer. Just the soft creak of footsteps coming closer. Then, silence. She stared at the door connecting the carriages. It was closed. Nothing moved on the other side. Then, just as she was about to breathe again, the door handle turned. She gasped and stepped back. The door opened slowly, but no one was there, only darkness. But it wasn't empty. Something was wrong with that darkness. It looked heavier, like it wanted to move into the light, to take her. Emily shut the door fast and locked it. She stumbled back into her seat, shaking. Then the lights flickered back on. The train lurched, and just like that, it was moving again. Fast. Too fast. She looked around. The other passengers were back, sitting in their seats like nothing had happened. The woman knitting, the man with the beanie, the couple laughing softly. Emily stared. Did you all see that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. No one looked up. No one responded. It was like she wasn't even there. She walked over to the older woman and touched her shoulder gently. The woman looked up. Her eyes were completely black. Emily jumped back, heart slamming against her ribs. The woman smiled, a slow, empty smile, and looked back down at her knitting. Emily turned to the couple. Both of them had the same black eyes, same strange smiles. She ran back to her seat, trying to calm herself. This couldn't be real. She was tired, maybe dreaming. But then, the lights flickered again, just once, and everything outside the windows changed. No more trees, no more streetlights. Outside was a long tunnel made of stone. Old stone, wet, moldy, covered in strange carvings that pulsed with a dim red light. Emily knew then, this train wasn't going to London. The man in the beanie stood up suddenly and walked past her, heading for the front of the train. She tried to stop him. "Where are we going?" He didn't answer. He just kept walking. So she followed him. Carriage after carriage. Every person she passed had those same black eyes, those same lifeless smiles. She made it to the front, where the driver's cabin was. The man in the beanie stood outside the cabin door, waiting. Then slowly, the door opened. Inside wasn't a driver, it was a mirror, a full-length mirror, but not like a normal one. In the reflection, Emily didn't look like herself. Her eyes were turning black. She screamed and turned away. The train came to a slow, smooth stop. The doors opened. Outside was not London. It was a station made of black stone. Cold, cracked tiles. No signs. No people. Just a long staircase leading down into endless dark. The passengers began to stand up and file out one by one, each of them silent. Emily backed away, trying to stay on the train, but the man in the beanie looked at her and whispered, "You got on. You have to get off." She shook her head, crying now. "No, I didn't mean to. I just wanted to go home." But no one listened. The lights inside the train began to go out, one by one, starting from the back. She ran, back through the carriages, toward the end of the train. She didn't know why, just that she had to get away. And just as the last light went out, she reached the final carriage. The emergency door was there. She pulled it open and jumped. She fell into cold grass. She rolled over and looked up. She was lying just outside her town's train station. It was morning. The sun was rising. Birds were chirping. Her phone buzzed. Full signal. 3 missed calls from her sister. She got up slowly, shaking all over. The train? Gone. No one believed her story, of course. They said no train was running at that time. Said she must have walked home in her sleep. But sometimes, late at night, she still hears that train whistle in the distance. And she never, ever rides the train alone again.